Chapter 6. The Glacier Lakes. Among the many unlooked-for treasures that are bound up and hidden away in the depths of the Sierra solitudes, none more surely charm and surprise all kinds of travelers than the Glacier Lakes. The forests and the glaciers and the snowy mountains of the streams advertise their wealth in a more or less telling manner, even in the distance. But nothing is seen of the lakes until we have climbed above them. All the upper branches of the rivers are fairly laden with lakes, like orchard trees with fruit. They lie embosomed in the deep woods, down in the groovy bottoms of canyons, high on bald tablelands, and around the feet of the icy peaks, mirroring back their wild beauty over and over again. Some conception of their lavish abundance may be made from the fact that, from one standpoint on the summit of Red Mountain, a day's journey to the east of Yosemite Valley, no fewer than 42 are displayed within a radius of 10 miles. The whole number in the Sierra can hardly be less than 1,500, not counting the smaller pools and tarns, which are innumerable. Perhaps 2/3 or more lie on the western flank of the range, and all are restricted to the alpine and subalpine regions. At the close of the last glacial period, the middle and foothill regions are bounded in lakes, all of which have long since vanished as completely as the magnificent ancient glaciers that brought them into existence. Through the eastern flank of the range is excessively steep. We find lakes pretty regularly distributed throughout even the most precipitous portions. They are mostly found in the upper branches of the canyons and in the glacier amphitheaters around the peaks. Occasionally long, narrow specimens occur upon the steep sides of the dividing ridges, their basins swung lengthwise like hammocks. And very rarely one is found lying so exactly on the summit of the range at the head of some pass that its waters are discharged both down flanks when the snow is melting fast. But however situated, they soon cease to form surprises to the studious mountaineer. For, like all the love work of nature, they are harmoniously related to one another, and to all other features of the mountains. It is easy, therefore, to find the bright lake eyes in the roughest and most ungovernable looking topography of any landscape countenance. Even in the lower regions where they have been closed for many a century, their rocky orbits are still discernible, filled in with the detritus of flood and avalanche. A beautiful system of grouping in correspondence with the glacial fountains is soon perceived. Also, their extension in the direction of the trends of ancient glaciers, and in general their dependence as to form, size, and position upon the character of the rocks in which their basins have been eroded, and the quantity and direction of application of the glacial force expended upon each basin. In the upper canyons, we usually find them in pretty regular succession, strung together like beads on the bright ribbons of their feeding streams, which pour white and gray with foam and spray. From one to the other, their perfect mirror stillness making impressive contrast with the grand blare and glare of the connecting cataracts. In Lake Hollow, on the north side of the Hoffman Spur, immediately above the Great Tuolumne Canyon, there are 10 lovely lakelets lying near together in one general hollow, like eggs in a nest seen from above. In general view, feathered with hemlock spruce and fringed with sedge. They seem to me the most singularly beautiful and interestingly located lake cluster I have ever yet discovered. Lake Tahoe, 22 miles long by about 10 miles wide, and from 500 to over 1,600 feet in depth, is the largest of all the Sierra Lakes. It lies just beyond the northern limit of the higher portion of the range, between the main axis and a spur that puts out on the east side from near the head of the Carson River. Its forested shores go curving in and out, many an emerald bay and pine-crowned promontory, and its waters are anywhere as keenly pure as any to be found amongst the highest mountains. Donner Lake, rendered memorable by the terrible fate of the Donner Party, is about 3 miles long and lies about 10 miles to the north of Tahoe. At the head of one of the tributaries of the Truckee, a few miles further north lies Lake Independence, about the same size as Donner, but far the greater number of lakes lies much higher and are quite small, few of them exceeding a mile in length, most of them less than half a mile. Among the lower edge of the lake belt, the smallest have disappeared by the filling in of their basins, leaving only those of considerable size. But all along the upper, freshly glaciated margin of the lake-bearing zone, every hollow, however small, lying within reach of the portion of the closed network of streams contains a bright, brimming pool, so that the landscapes viewed from the mountain tops seem to be sown broadcast with them. Many of the larger lakes are encircled with smaller ones like central gems girdled with sparkling brilliance. In general, however, there is no marked dividing lines as to size. In order, therefore, to prevent confusion, I would say to you that in giving numbers I can include none less than 500 yards in circumference. In the basin of the Merced River, I counted 131, of which 111 are upon the tributaries that fall so grandly into Yosemite Valley. Pohano Creek, which forms the fall of that name, takes its rise in a beautiful lake lying beneath the shadow of a lofty granite spur that puts out from Buena Vista Peak. This is now the only lake left in the whole Pohono Basin. The Illuminate has 16, the Nevada no fewer than 67, the Tenaya 8, Hoffman Creek 5, Yosemite Creek 14. There are two other lake-bearing affluents of the Merced, viz. The South Fork with 15, the Cascade Creek with 5, both of which unite with the main trunk below Yosemite. The Merced River as a whole, it is remarkably like an elm-like tree, and it requires but little effort on the part of the imagination to picture in standing upright with all its lakes hanging upon its spreading branches. The topmost 80 miles in height. Now add all the other lake-bearing rivers of the Sierra, each in its place, and you will have a truly glorious spectacle. An avenue, the length and width of the range, the long, slender, gray shafts of the main trunk, the Milky Way of arching branches and silver lakes, all clearly defined and shining on the sky. How excitedly such an addition to the scenery would be gazed at. Yet these lakelets, rivers, are still more excitingly beautiful and impressive in their natural positions to those who have the eyes to see them as they lie embedded in their meadows and forests and glacier-sculpted rocks. When a mountain lake is born, like when a young eye it first opens to the light, it is an irregular, expressionless crescent enclosed in the banks of rocks and ice. Bare glaciated rock on the lower side, the rugged snout of a glacier on the upper level. In this condition it remains for many a year until at length, toward the end of some auspicious cluster of seasons, the glacier recedes beyond the upper margin of the basin, leaving it open from shore to shore for the first time, thousands of years after its conception beneath the glacier that excavated its basin. The landscape, cold and bare, is reflected in the pure depth. The winds ruffle its glassy surface, and the sun fills it with a throbbing spangles, while its waves begin to lap and murmur around its leafless shores, sun spangles during the day and reflected stars at night. Its only flowers, the winds and the snow, its only visitors. Meanwhile, the glacier continues to recede in numerous rills, still younger than the lake itself, bring down a glacier mud, sand grains, and pebbles, giving rise to margin rings and plats of soil. To these fresh soil beds come many a waiting plant. First, a hardy carex with arching leaves and spike of brown flowers. Then, as the seasons grow warmer, moss. Shrubs also hasten in time to the new gardens. Colmea, with its glossy leaves and purple flowers, the Arctic willow, making soft woven carpets together with the heathy bryathis and cassiope, the fairest and dearest of them all. Insects now enrich the air, frogs pipe cheerily into the shallows, soon followed by the ouzel, which is the first bird to visit a glacier lake, as the sedge is the first of the plants. So the young lady grows in beauty, becoming more and more humanely lovable from century to century. Groves of aspen spring up and hardy pines, and hemlock spruce until it is richly overshadowed and embowed. But while its shores are still being enriched, the soil beds creep out with incessant growth, contracting its area, while the lighter mud particles deposited on the bottom cause it to grow constantly shallower, until at length the last remnants of the lake vanishes, flows forever in ripe and natural old age, and now its feeding stream goes winding on without halting through the new gardens and groves that have taken its place. The length of the life of any lake depends ordinarily on the capacity of its basin, as compared with the carrying power of the streams that flow into it, the characters of the rocks over which the streams flow, and the relative position of the lake towards other lakes. In a series whose basin lie in the same canyon and are fed one by one and the main stream, the uppermost will of course vanish first unless some other lake-filling agent comes in to modify the result, because at first it receives nearly all the sediments that the stream brings down, only the finest of the mud particles being carried through the highest of the series to its next below. Then the next higher, and the next would be successfully filled, and the lowest would be the last to vanish. But this simplicity as to duration is broken in upon in various ways, chiefly through the action of side streams that enter the lower lakes direct. For, notwithstanding many of these side tributaries are quite short, and during late summer feeble, they all become powerful torrents in springtime, when the snow is melting and carry not only sand and pine needles, but lake trunks, large trunks and boulders, tons in weight, sweeping them down their steeply inclined channels and into canyon, and upon these they draw for lake-filling materials, while the main trunk stream flows mostly over clean glacier pavements, where but little moraine matter is ever left for them to carry. Thus a small rapid stream with abundance of loose transportable material within its reach may fill up an extensive basin in a few centuries, while a large perennial trunk stream, following over clean and enduring pavements, through ordinarily 100 times larger, may not fill a smaller basin in thousands of years. In comparative influence of great and small streams, as lake fillers is strikingly illustrated in the Yosemite Valley, through which the Merced flows, the bottom of the valley is now composed of level meadowlands and dry sloping soil beds, planted with oak and pine, but it was once a lake stretching from wall to wall, and nearly one end of the valley to the other, forming one of the most beautiful cliff-bound sheets of water that ever existed in the Sierra. And though never perhaps seen by human eye, it was but yesterday, geologically speaking, since it disappeared, and the traces of its existence are still fresh. It may easily be restored to the eye of the imagination and viewed in its grandeur, about as truly and vividly as if actually before us. Now we find that the detritus which fills the magnificent basin was not brought down from the distant mountains by such as those of the Indian Canyon, the Sentinel, and the Three Bold Brothers, and by a few small residential glaciers which lingered in the shadows of the wall long after the main trunk glacier had receded beyond the head of the valley. Had the glaciers that once covered the range been melted at once, leaving the entire surface bare from top to bottom simultaneously, then of course all the lakes would have come into existence at the same time, and the highest other circumstances being equal would, as we have seen, be the first to vanish. But because they melted gradually from the foot of the range upward, the lower lakes were the first to see the light and the first to be obliterated. Therefore, instead of finding the lakes of the present day at the foot of the range, we find them at the top. Most of the lower lakes vanished thousands of years before those now brightening the alpine landscape were born. And in general, owing to the deliberation of the upward retreat of the glaciers, the lowest of the existing lakes are also the oldest. A gradual transition being apparent throughout the entire belt, from the older forested, meadow-rimmed, and contracted forms all the way to the top of those that are newborn, lying bare and meadowless among the highest peaks. A few small lakes, unfortunately situated, are extinguished suddenly by a single swoop of an avalanche, carrying down an immense number of trees together with the soil they were growing upon. Others were obliterated by landslips, earthquake taluses, etc. But these lake deaths, compared with those resulting from the deliberate and incessant deposition of sediments, may be deemed accidental. Their fate is like that of the trees struck by lightning. The lake line is of course still rising, its present elevation being about 8,000 feet above sea level, somewhat higher than this toward the southern extremity of the range, lower toward the northern, on account of this difference in time of the withdrawal of the glaciers. Due to difference in climate, specimens occur here and there considerably below the limit, and basins specifically protected from inwashing detritus are exceptional in size. These, however, are not sufficiently numerous to make any marked irregularity in the line. The highest I have yet found lies at an elevation of 12,000 feet in the glacier womb, at the foot of one of the highest of the summit peaks, a few miles to the north of Mount Hitter. The basins of perhaps 25 or 30 are still in process of formation beneath the few lingering glaciers. But by the time they are born, an equal or greater number will probably have died. Since the beginning of the close of the ice period, the whole number in the range has perhaps never been greater than at present. A rough approximation to the average duration of these mountain lakes may be made from data already suggested, but I cannot stop here to present this subject in detail. I must also forego, in the meantime, the pleasure of a full discussion of the interesting question of lake basin formation, for which fine, clear demonstrative material abounds in these mountains. In addition to what might have already been given on the subject, I will only make this one statement. Every lake in the Sierra is a glacier lake. Their basins are not merely remodeled and scored out by this mighty agent, but in the first place were eroded from the solid. I must now make haste to give some greater views of representative specimens lying at the different elevations of the main lake belt, confining myself to descriptions of the features most characteristic of each.